What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a video that is supposed to give us evidence that Christianity is true. This comes in the form of, I guess, a testimony type of video where a guy is going to be relaying what convinced him that Christianity is true. So we're going to be taking a look at what he considers to be good evidence for Christianity. I honestly can't think of any good evidence for Christianity, considering that the entire religion is based on the one book that is not historically reliable in any kind of sense, and all the claims of the Bible, either theologically or historically, simply aren't true. So I don't understand what evidence he could present that it is true. But today we're going to fuck around and find out. So if you want to fuck around and find out with me, please stay tuned. Well, I have to say, we're not starting off on a very good foot here, because the question that you have at the beginning isn't really a question. It's just like, evidence in Christianity? Like, that's not a full question. Is there evidence Christianity is true? Or is there evidence for Christianity? Or something like that. I feel like the question is really a malformed question. Like, it's not actually asking a question. It's almost like a statement that's forced to be made a question. It's very uneasy, at least for me.
Well, starting with the historicity of Jesus and whether or not he actually existed, I think scholars have pretty much settled that, where if you ask just about any scholar out there, they'll tell you he did exist. He was born, he lived, he died, he was crucified by the Romans.
Oh man, I am so glad that you brought this up, because we just recently had Bart Ehrman here to tell us why you shouldn't use the consensus of scholarships to establish something as a fact. You probably didn't see it. Here's the clip.
Bill makes dubious use of modern authorities. Bill constantly quotes modern scholars as if somehow that constitutes evidence for his point of view. As Bill himself knows, the fact that the majority of New Testament scholars would agree with his 4 points is not proof that they are right. For one thing, the majority of New Testament scholars are believers in the New Testament. That is, they're theologically committed to the text. So of course they agree on these points. I should note that the majority of historians do not agree with Bill's conclusions. Does that make those conclusions wrong? No, it simply means that his conclusions are not persuasive to most historians.
Yeah, so, I really don't care what the consensus of New Testament scholarship says about the historicity of Jesus. Just because they say he existed without giving us good evidence to suggest that he existed does not mean that he actually existed. But regardless, this is called the appeal to authority fallacy. And yes, it is a fallacy, despite what a lot of people seem to think. The appeal to authority fallacy is when you cite the authorities to verify that something is true. That's exactly what this young man has done here in this video. It's not really a good way to argue your point, especially since Jesus' historicity has been questioned in the scholarship, and so now we have to deal directly with the evidence that he either did or didn't exist. Normally for this, like, why should I be a Christian, or what evidence do you have that Christianity is true type of conversation, I wouldn't bring up the historicity of Jesus. But if the person is going to bring up the historicity of Jesus or the historical reliability of the New Testament as a reason why Christianity is true, then I feel like you must engage on the topic. The fact that New Testament scholarship seems to be intellectually bankrupt when it comes to these harder questions about Christianity, I think that using the authorities on this point is really poor form.
Looking historically, going back almost 2,000 years, outside manuscripts and other historical documents detail how there was this fledgling movement of Christians that came out of this area around Galilee, and how they were persecuted by the Roman Empire, and how despite that persecution, as we fast forward to today, that they still existed.
Okay, just because the movement of Christians existed does not mean that the information that they based their movement on is historically accurate. So just because we have extra biblical references to a movement of Christians developing in this area of the world does not mean that Jesus either existed, that he was the Son of God, or that he even died. Also, another thing to note here is that the Christians, as a cult group in this area, were no more persecuted than other cult groups at the time. So to say that they were persecuted, but yet they still managed to grow as a group is just really ignoring the rest of history concerned with how cult groups were persecuted and how many cult groups existed on into the 2nd and 3rd and 4th centuries. I mean, if a cult group managing to exist, even though they were being persecuted, somehow means that they're based on some kind of truth, does that mean other cult groups that did the exact same thing are also true? Most likely the historical documents he's talking about here are the likes of Tacitus, Pliny, probably Papias, Irenaeus, Polycarp. There's probably a lot of extra biblical sources he could be referencing here, but he's choosing not to. If I was going to cite some kind of information in this way, I would definitely be sure to list off these authors or these historians that people could research further into. As it exists right now in this video, he's just ambiguously talking about extra biblical sources that show that there was a movement of Christians growing in that area of the world. The way that he's presented it here shouldn't convince anybody.
They grew and they flourished, and today there's about 2.9 billion Christians worldwide.
Okay, I don't see how that matters, the fact that Christianity is so big now. I get that there's a lot of Christians out there, but I also think that Christianity wouldn't have been as popular if Constantine hadn't have taken it up and forced everybody to be Christian. Kind of seems like Christianity had the leg up there.
So historically, there's this picture, this story of what shouldn't have been. It started with this one man who was crucified on the cross that turned into this small little fledgling group of people, movement of people that were being persecuted by this huge empire that somehow survived that persecution when there was tons of other faiths or religions that were birthing up in that time that didn't. They were crushed because they were against the state. But yet somehow Christianity not only survived, but grew and flourished and became what it is today.
Well, again, the Christians were no more persecuted than any other group out there. But just because other cult groups diminished and were forgotten or lost does not mean that Christianity was true because it survived. Also, I feel like my alternative idea as to how Christianity started is much more parsimonious than Jesus being killed and resurrecting. Most mainly because it uses already existing Jewish sects that came into this idea that a Messiah figure had already come, died, resurrected, defeated Satan, and rose back up into heaven, and then they started their movement. Now, true, this movement of Christians would have been relatively small, considering the fact that these sects of Jews wouldn't have been all that big, because the major sect of Jews would have been the more traditional Jews. But these new Jews that came about, these Jewish Christians, they would have had a different idea about the Messiah than the already existing majority of the Jewish population. But considering that the diversity of beliefs in the Jewish community allowed for many of these Jews and Jewish sects to come about producing many different ideas, it's no wonder that at least one of these ideas really stuck and survived. The one that seemed to be the easiest to believe and the one that seems to satisfy what the believer needs seems to be the one that won out. The Pauline version of Christianity won out. This guy right here is acting like Christians developed immediately because Jesus was crucified. And it started with his 12 disciples who then preached the word to everybody. I think that it is less likely that that happened than existing Jewish sects developed different ideas about the Messiah and eventually won one out. Not to mention the fact that we actually have evidence of these various Jewish Christian sects existing. Like with 2 Peter, in 2 Peter, it talks about how, they didn't believe in cleverly devised myths, because apparently there was somebody walking around claiming that these were myths about Jesus and not that he actually existed in history. We also have various indication of Docetists existing, which Docetists would have been people that thought that Jesus never existed here on earth, but only as a celestial figure. We also have the various gospels out there that didn't make the cut into the New Testament. These varying ideas show that the Jewish Christian landscape of the first century was so incredibly diverse that it's no wonder at least one of these Jesuses managed to make it out. And again, about the persecution. Just because the Christians weren't completely stamped out by the Roman government does not mean that Christianity is true.
That shouldn't have happened. That in and of itself was kind of a miracle.
Citation fucking needed. Also, by definition, miracles are the least likely thing to happen. They are implausible. So for you to say that it was a miracle that they survived just means that it is highly unlikely and nearly impossible for them to have survived. But yet they did. I don't understand why miracles convince anybody of truth, considering that they are the least likely possibility.
So just looking at it historically, that is a miracle, and that is an argument for the truth and the existence of Christianity. It's real, it's tangible, it's survived, it's been somewhat proven.
No, Christianity hasn't been proven. For this general conversation, I would be fine granting that Jesus existed in history for the purposes of this conversation. But even if Jesus existed in history, and even if Jesus was crucified by the Romans, that does not mean that Christianity is true. Christianity, at least what most people mean by Christianity being true, is that Jesus was the Son of God and that he resurrected and absolved them of their sins. When we talk about the truth of Christianity, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about whether some itinerant preacher in first century Judea pissed off the Romans and got crucified. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether or not Jesus is the Son of God. And for that particular argument, as far as the truth of Christianity goes, Jesus' historicity doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't matter. So has anything that he said in this video proven the truth of Christianity? Proven that Jesus is God? That he resurrected and he absolved people of sins? The same sin that God just made up and gave humans? No, it doesn't.
Not to, again, neglect that there's been some evil and some horrible things done in the name of Christianity over time. They haven't always been the ones that were persecuted, but have sometimes been the persecutors. But still, at the end of the day, we're human. And there's good in us and there's bad in us.
You see, I fundamentally disagree with there's good in us and there's bad in us. People can do bad things, horrible things, but people can also do good things, awesome things, great things. But still, that does not mean that people are inherently bad or inherently good. If we were born inherently good or inherently bad, then it would only make sense if babies were bad or babies were good. I think that babies are inherently indifferent, and people eventually come to do bad things or come to do good things, depending on a multitude of factors. All of this is to get around to his initial point here, and that's the fact that there are good Christians and bad Christians doesn't mean a lick about whether or not Christianity is true. But there's a big caveat here. Typically, when atheists bring up the subject of Christians being bad or doing bad things, it's normally in response to Christians saying that you have to be Christian in order to be good. You don't. Atheists don't go around just saying Christianity ain't true because Christians do bad shit all the time. They're constantly doing bad shit. That means it ain't true. Duh. That's not what atheists are going around saying. We only bring up the bad shit that Christians have done in the past as an argument against the idea that you gotta be a Christian or just believe in God in order to be a good person or to have a moral foundation. It has nothing to do with the truth of Christianity.
And we can't toss out that, we can't say that, oh, this Christianity is false just because this has been done in the name of that, or this faith is false because this has been done in the name of that. Looking at Islam, horrible atrocities, 9/11, bombings, terrorism. There's been so much done in the name of Islam, but does that mean that Islam is all bad, that all Muslims are bad, that faith is irrelevant? I can't say that.
Well, hold on. I feel like you're talking about Islam in a completely different way than you were talking about Christianity. Because what you were saying is that whether or not Christians are good or bad, that doesn't affect whether or not Christianity is true. But then when you shift over to talk about Islam, you talk about how, there are Muslims that do like terrorist attacks and they do bad shit all the time and all this other stuff. But that doesn't mean that all Muslims are bad. You see how you shifted from the truth about the religion to some kind of moral truth about generalizing an entire group of people that adhere to a religion. I get that you're a Christian and you don't think that Islam is true. In order to make an apt comparison here, you need to say that just because some Muslims do bad shit sometimes, that doesn't mean that Islam is false. What's ironic here is that I've heard plenty of Christians say this exact thing, that Muslims, their religion teaches them to be hateful, to subject women, and to do all these bad things. Therefore, it's not true. I've heard that plenty of times from Christians. So it feels like to me that you're not making arguments, at least at this point, against atheists or people who, don't believe in any religion or anything like that. It seems like you're making an argument against your fellow Christians being dicks.
I can't toss out this whole group of people and call them misguided based on the actions of a few. So there's active people that are Christians that are being moved by what they say is the Spirit and being motivated by the words of God telling them to love their neighbor as themselves and to care for the least of these, that is propelling them to be a solution to a problem.
Except if you're gay or just part of the LGBTQ community in general. We don't want none of you people here. Y'all can fuck off. Also, everybody that doesn't believe in Christianity, y'all can fuck off too. America's a Christian nation. If you don't like it, you can get the fuck out as well. And also, the only people that really deserve any kind of love and attention are Christians. I get it. That's kind of a generalization of a Christian douchebag. But the fact is that there are some Christians out there that feel that exact same way. Christianity doesn't just teach the love your neighbor message and care for those who are less fortunate than you. It has stipulations on it, like with the LGBTQ community. Christianity, if you were to take it literally, just like some Islamic fundamentalists take their religion literally, Christians would have to kill people in the LGBTQ community. If somebody is outed as being part of that community, you should take them out in front of the entire town and have everybody stone them. That's what your religion teaches. Now, you have several apologetics in order to get around this, obviously, but that still does not detract from the fact that your religion teaches that. There are independent fundamentalist Baptists right now that teach that very same thing. And they don't only teach it about the LGBTQ community. Anybody that violates any part of the Ten Commandments or any of the OT laws, they too should get their punishment as outlined by the Bible. So you can't just sit there and act like Christianity is all hunky-dory. It's not. I get that you just spent a little bit of time saying, oh, there's asshole Christians out there, and that shouldn't brand Christianity as false. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Christianity, taken literally, is a pile of shit. And that's regardless of whether or not it's true.
For me, that comes back to my faith. That comes back to my belief that there is a God, that Christianity is that way, and that Jesus is our source.
Source for what? Bullshit? Yeah, Jesus is definitely a source of bullshit. Personally, I feel like his entire existence is bullshit, but even if you want to grant his historical existence, the rest of his story is bullshit as well. You go out there and you look for arguments that support the historical reliability of the Gospels, and all you'll find is fundamentalists and theologically connected scholars that use bad arguments to suggest that the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament is accurate to history. There is nothing that proves that Jesus was the Son of God, other than a guy that was hallucinating and reading the scriptures too much, Paul. Historically speaking, that's all that you'll find that attests to the truth of Christianity. I don't find Christianity to be all that true. I do think the historical grounding of Christianity is important to whether or not it's true. The fact that Jesus probably didn't exist in history, I don't really think that that affects the quote-unquote truth about it, because there obviously could be this supernatural celestial realm. Jesus could have descended from the upper heavens to the lower heavens and been crucified by Satan in the lower heavens, just above the firmament. It's possible that all of these things could have happened and that Christianity is most definitely true. So you don't need the historicity of Jesus or the Gospels, for that matter, for the truth of Christianity. But I still don't think that Christianity is all that true. Not just because of all of the historical inaccuracies that are contained in the New Testament, but because we don't have any reason to think that anything that is said in the Bible, whether theologically or historically, is true. There's just nothing to suggest that it is. ExploreGod.com. Woo! Well, heathens, that's going to be it for the video today. Personally, I was not persuaded that Christianity is any more true than I thought before watching this video. I don't know about you guys, but I found the arguments contained within it are really poor, simplistic, and don't actually try to prove Christianity to be true. What this guy did was just proclaim that it's true because of a lot of bad information that he has. And I really don't think that anybody should consider Christianity to be true based on that bad information. But hey, I could be wrong. If I am, let me know down in the comments. I'd really love to hear what y'all think about it. And hey, while you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.